You know, back when I was 19 years old, I was given the best piece of advice that I've ever received. I was told, Daryl, when you stop fighting, the fighting stops. Let's talk about that. Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today I'm joined by Kathleen Flanagan. Kathleen, welcome. So great to have you.
Well, thank you so much, Daryl. I really appreciate being on your show.
Thank you. You know, I was fortunate to do your TV show recently, and I'm sure we'll learn about that and you know, how cool it is. I had a great time. But you do a lot of things and interesting things. And, you know, as part of your introduction, I'd love it if you could just, you know, tell us who you are, where you're from, and some of those wonderful, interesting things that you do.
Okay. Well, I started in this journey when I was 16 years old. I was suicidal at that time, and my mother had taken me to an Edgar Cayce meditation. And it was the first time I ever did a meditation, and I was given the rod and the staff by what I thought was God. I just learned 40 years later it was the Archangel Michael. And they said, you're going to change the world. And I thought they were absolutely nuts. And of course, it also introduced me to realizing that there was something more out there than just this 3D mundane thing, because my parents, the way they were living their life, I would rather be dead than to continue living the way they were living. And that was the main thing for me, was just really needing something more. And I was a very angry, lost child back then, but I didn't understand why. I do now. And that thread of my life keeps going on both ends. Like I'm going further back because there was a point that I could only go so far. And I ended up learning, studying Eastern and Western philosophies. And I know we talked about that a little bit on my show and what that did for me. And then going into the School of Metaphysics, because I really wanted to understand more of what's going on in my head, because I was very intuitive, very psychic. I could hear things. I could see things. I always thought people could do it, and discovered that they couldn't. And people said they would give their right arm to have 1/10 of the psychic abilities that I had. And I said, well, they can have it, because I didn't like it. Because I didn't understand it. It was, you know, when you've got spirit guides talking to you 24/7, and you don't understand what's happening, you're thinking you're crazy, because I already thought I was crazy, because I thought my parents were crazy. So therefore I was crazy. And you bring in that generational stuff that I didn't know, which were not words back in those days, but that's what it was. And I just kept moving forward. And in that process, I did not know how to speak. I did not know how to do critical thinking. I didn't know how to do anything. And I became a paralegal. So I learned how to protect myself, because safety was not an option in my life. I was always afraid of everything. And I had reason for that fear. And I learned how to critical think and understand and learn how to protect myself, so I could try to be something more. And in 2008, I was asked by the Archangel Ariel to go to Chicago to write a book, which ended up being 3. And so Dancing Souls came out of that. And it's the journey of an awakening spirit of what the waking up process was, because I was everybody said it was anger, but it was really rage. I was raging. And I understand that more now, like in the last couple of weeks, what the term was and where it came from. And in writing the books, I just wanted to be a better person. I did not know the word mindset. I didn't really I knew paradigms, but I wasn't thinking they were paradigms. And I just wanted to be a better person. And by doing that, everything changed. And I was very, very committed to understanding what was in my way, because I knew I was the only one in my way. And a lot of times before that, you know, we want to blame God. We want to blame other people, that things aren't working out and it's never our fault. And I knew at that moment, everything that was wrong was my fault. And in that process, it was a journey of really discovering more, understanding my role, who I am, full remembrance. But I went through the dark night of the soul, which was very life-threatening on many levels during that period of time. And it just took a long time to come back. But when I came back in last year, there was a moment where I realized that I gave myself the best life I could have ever given myself, even though I went my whole life saying I would never have done this to myself. And it was the best thing I could have done because this is where I was supposed to be. I've always wanted to be here. And I'm finally here because I was so far out of alignment. And I just wanted to bring the inside and the outside together. And Spirit granted that because it was my intention to do so. So my life is 100% night and day, total responsible for everything that happens in my life. And I also realized during that period that if I want to be happy, that's an inside job. And I'm happy because I want to be happy, not because something outside made me happy. And that was the biggest game changer for me when I said, I just want to be happy. And when life threw stuff at me, it was like, okay, happiness is still number one. Don't care. Figure it out. I'm not sure. I'm not going to worry about it today. Today, I'm happy. And the answers will come when they come. And I just took on a totally different attitude about life of just allowing things to happen and trusting a process that I never fully trusted until probably in the last maybe 5 years is when I feel like I completely surrendered and really started moving in a new direction, accelerated new direction.
Very cool. Yeah, that's really cool. You hit on so many things, and I think our stories are somewhat similar. We discovered when we were on your show, and there was a time in my life that all I wanted to be a better person, but I wanted to feel better. I just wanted to feel like I belong here. I'm not, nuts. I can have a happy life, right? Like I'm allowed to have a happy life. And I think that's something that we miss sometimes. We miss that it's so simple, and we run over the simplicity because like, no, it can't be that simple. And we always have to back up, or at least I had to back up to simplicity. And that's where the growth started for me. And you talked about the word allowing, and that's probably my favorite word in the English language, because one of my good friends says, life knows how to life. I don't need to tell my heart to beat or myself to breathe or digest or anything like that. Life knows how to life. And if I just slow down enough to listen, I can discover that it actually works that way. And you hit on so many great points. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. I agree with that. And I remember throughout most of my life, that word surrender just eluded me. And I remember one day, Oprah actually, once in a blue moon, I would catch her show. And this one day, it was about surrender. And it was like, oh my God, that's the perfect thing. And probably within 2 days, I forgot what she said. And then I went back to surrender eluding me. And to me, surrender is just allowing. And the way I interpret it, that makes sense for me, is take baby steps. Do what you can with what you know, and then stop and allow spirit to come in and then move again. Because there's that resting point that we have to take. And that during that resting point is when I realized that self-care can come in at that point too. Instead of beating myself up saying, you're not doing enough. What do you know? You're stupid. Because we do that to ourselves. And I decided that that's just all bogus, because I am smart. I know what to do. I just don't know what to do right now to get me to where I want to go in the fastest direction possible, at the fastest speed possible, I should say, because I was always about the destination and not the journey. And I discovered it's the journey is where the becoming happens. It's in the journey that you don't miss anything, that when it finally opens up, it opens up. And I look at, I understand the bamboo plant more, where it builds those roots for 3 years. And then all of a sudden it just goes poof. And you're like, whoa, well, that's what life can do. And I've heard so many people do that and have that experience. And I'm right there on the precipice of that happening. I mean, I see that happening for me. And it's just like last night I asked, what is it that I need to do to get that dam to open? Where's the weakest point to put my finger in to start the flow? And they laugh at me, and I get that, but it's also, I'm right there. And it's like, I know I need to stop and surrender and just rest in the process. And I get it, but I don't want to, you know, but
Yeah,
that's okay.
yeah. It is okay. It's completely okay. And I always look at it like the more I get my grubby little fingers involved, the more stuff I screw up because I think I can control it. And if I just back away a little bit and take my grubby little fingers out of it, you know, that it helps because then I can watch it unfold. I I like to think of, you know, there's a balance there with, because I like to take risks. I like the journey. I like to do things that I haven't done. But that's the journey part. You know, the outcome part is not up to me. And one of the things I wrote in my book was I need to leave that to a universe better equipped to handle it, because I'm not the person that can handle it. I can't handle figuring out what the outcomes are. And the coolest thing has been for me is that the outcomes have been better than I would have ever imagined they could be, right?
Totally agree with that. I could never have created my life the way it is today if my hands were in it, because I would have screwed it up, or it wouldn't have looked like this. I wouldn't have the magic, because sometimes life is very magical. I mean, I went to Chicago and I met my partner there. Who knew? And and when I met him, I was in another relationship, and he came on the table, and I remember, like, why did nobody take you? Because it was like the first time I saw a man that was like a real man, not an abusive guy, not a control freak, not all the things that I've ever dated. There was just something about his energy. And it was the first time I've ever experienced what that is. Almost like how my uncle was when I was a little kid, because we all had a favorite uncle. He was all the same uncle, I should say. And he was that kind of person. And, you know, it took us 8 years to get together, but we got together. And I would never have thought that going to Chicago, I would have met him and then have that experience. And that was part of another reason why I said I want to be a better person, because I actually saw another human being who was actually a true person, not putting on a face, not putting on a facade, not acting like there's something better or bigger, or, you know, I'm ahead of, you know, above you. None of that. He was genuine. And to me, that was a sign of hope for me to say, there's one person who's showing me that it's okay to become that genuine person.
That's beautiful. Yeah, that's really beautiful. My wife and she and I are best friends. We're actually going to be celebrating 20 years married here in the next couple of months.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's just, and really, it's just so cool, you know, because people say, and I have a different version of it. I have a different version of what most people say, but they say, find someone that will push you. And I say, push yourself, find someone who pushes themselves, and then you've got a relationship, because you're supporting each other in that quest. And I think that's such a wonderful thing. You know, one thing that I thought was really cool that you brought up when you first started talking was responsibility. And I find that I once looked at responsibility as, you know, get away from me. I can't do it. I can't do it all. Leave me alone. You know, like, stop. Don't give me more. But now I look at responsibility as synonymous with freedom, because I'm the one that can move my journey forward, and you know, whilst allowing my journey, but I'm responsible for doing the work. I'm responsible for how I respond. I'm responsible for, you know, how I treat everybody else on the planet, all of those things. And I can't blame it on anything, and I can't blame it on anybody. I just take the responsibility. And I think that's just such a great topic that maybe, you know, sometimes people don't really understand how crucial it is to moving our journey forward.
I think it's a lifelong journey to move our life forward. And there's so many people that are stuck in the rut. They're allowing what happened to them as children, being victims to society, and why should I bother? And I know that the generation behind mine, which I think is more your generation, the latchkey kids, they still have a lot of anger about they can't trust anyone. Nobody cares about them because they were left alone and they didn't have babysitters when they should have, when mom and dad were both working. And I find that because even my partner is that generation. And even though he's not angry that way, how he operates still shows that. And I've been showing him more about, taking on the responsibility, because he's such a grounding force for me that I need that so I can soar, because most people will never let me soar the way I want to, and he will. And as I'm soaring, he's seeing I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to be angry. Look at what's changing in her life. So like you said, yes, we're both taking responsibility for our own stuff, and we're both pushing each other, but we're doing it independently, but we support each other, which is something that I think by me taking the responsibility that I did allows me to, instead of doing that girly crap of you don't love me, I do that anyways. But it's in a fun way, it's in a fun way. And I know where it's coming from, but we do talk about those things if I'm feeling insecure, because I will still feel insecure, and I'm still a girl, and girls do certain things a certain way that drive men absolutely crazy. And men do things that drive us crazy. And we talk about those things to get clarity and understanding. Or there will be times when you're not your father. Why are you treating me like your father treated you? I'm not your daughter. I'm not a little girl, and it's nothing that he's intentionally doing. And being responsible enough, I could see that to where we can back off. And he goes, okay, I see what you're saying, because something happened in his day that he obviously felt out of control or whatever, and then comes back in, and then we get back right on track again, which to me is a very healthy relationship, because when we don't talk about things that are upsetting us, that's when the divorces happen. That's why we have severed relationships. That's why there's that anger and bitterness. And I remember working as a paralegal in the domestic relations, and I would just watch these parents, and it was like, you loved each other at one point, but there was no signs of love. And I just didn't want that in my life. And I thought communication is everything. If you can't talk about it, then you shouldn't be together.
100% agree. Yeah. I mean, it really is. I as you know, I got involved in the 12 steps many moons ago, and it was really transformational for me, because I was 19 when I was introduced to those. And it's like this roadmap. I didn't look at it like that then. I looked at it like, oh man, I got to do all this crazy stuff. but they term and they talk about the 12 steps as 3 different sort of sections: trust God, clean house, help others. And I could not agree more. And the clean house part is, I think, just what you were talking about, but not only with ourselves, we have to do that with our relationships. We have to do that with people that we're aligned with and close to, because there was a guy that I used to do business with, and he used to say, and I don't know how tuned in of a guy he was, but he said it, and so many things we learned from people that we wouldn't expect to learn something from. But he would say to these clients that we had, he would say, if anything's wrong, just let us know. Don't let anything fester. And I'm like, yeah, man, like that's how good relationships work. I believe we just, you deal with things as they come up, and don't let things fester. And that's how we continue to keep the streets clean. I have to clean my side of the street. My partner has to clean their side of the street, and then we have to clean our street, because sometimes things come up. And I love that, how you explain that, because it's just really, I don't know if there's anything more heartfelt and gratifying than having someone who you completely trust and they completely trust you. And just care about each other to the point. And I say this not in jest, but I don't mean it to sound as tragic as it may sound, but I would take a bullet for my wife anytime. Anytime. It doesn't matter. Anyway, that's how I feel about our relationship.
And that's how Sal and I are too. I mean, I know that man will do whatever it takes to keep me alive. Yeah, I mean, he's proven it over and over. Sometimes I think it's almost ridiculous, but I understand it and it's okay. I had to learn to receive that because I've never had anybody willing to do that for me. They just assume put me under the bus or kill me or wish I was dead or whatever it was that I heard and experienced throughout my life that way. But I remember when you were talking before Sal ever came in, I was in a partnership with my ex-partner. I mean, we're still business partners, and his brother. And, when you start bringing more people in, the dynamics really change. And there were times that Bill and I would just rant and rave. I mean, it was like we all took different times of ranting about Michael. Michael was really good at pushing our buttons, and he knew the business inside and out, and he asked us to come in and join him. And we did, but there were moments that just really frustrated the hell out of us. And we dealt with it. I mean, he and Bill and I would complain, then Michael and I, or Bill and Michael. I mean, it was like we all took turns complaining about the other person, and all we were doing was venting. I didn't take anything personal. Bill and Michael never took anything personal. It was just a vent, because sometimes in business, you just have to vent. And it was such a safety feeling because there was no judgment. It's like, no, I get it. I'm in the same boat. And, and usually when we're really angry is when we did something stupid in the field, and then we would have to go drive another 4 hours to redo what we screwed up to begin with. And you're angry and you just need to vent it to somebody who understands that. And Michael was always the one, well, I guess you're going back out there, and you're like, just so angry. But it was such a healthy, beautiful relationship, that it was a triple braided cord. And we were doing so much, and our clients loved us, and we were all doing each of what we loved the most in that particular industry, because we were an environmental consultants. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was like a marriage made in heaven. And yes, you had personality dynamics, but that didn't matter. There was so much respect there. And I think that was the first time that I felt, especially with men, because I had serious issues with men because of my father. And it was the first time that there were two men that I actually trusted and didn't stab me in the back or throw me under the bus or anything else. And I think that was the beginning of me making a change, not aware of it at the time, but I think it was a beginning of a forward movement that maybe I can trust people after all, because I trusted no one. And I wanted to really learn how to trust people, because that's something, when you've had abuse in your life, trust is a very hard thing to do. Mm. And I wanted to bring that forward. And, and I was in drugs, and I went into a rehab at 17. So I know that was the beginning of helping me to see a little bit up here, but it didn't mean I had enough at that age. I didn't even know why I was raging at that point. Because sometimes we don't, we forget to protect ourselves. Our spirit will do things to help protect us by really bringing it down, and life brings it back up in bite-sized pieces. So you don't have to really go down that rabbit hole to a point where you don't know if you'll come back. It's gentle how they work.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And I've noticed in my life over the years, and they used to say this in the 12-step groups when I was younger, but you never get any more than you can actually handle. And sometimes, you feel like maybe you're choking down an alligator, but you can. It's just a matter of whether or not, you believe you can. And I truly believe that. And then other times it's bite-sized chunks and like, okay, I got it. But But I think it takes the difficult things for me, and I love this sort of phrase, I guess, but when we're sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's when we'll actually, move to change and do things differently. And I believe that wholeheartedly, because that's where I've had to get to in many instances throughout my life, and not just when I was a kid fighting drugs and alcohol. It was in business. It was in a number of different things, personal relationships, et cetera, family relationships. You get sick and tired of being sick and tired, and you have to do things differently. And I think that's, there's these little wake up calls that we get. And the only question is, am I going to pay attention, and am I going to do things differently, or am I not?
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I always loved when I was younger, the 2x4 would come up and smack me. Okay. Then it would be the 4x8, and it's like, okay, still don't want to deal with it. And then it would be like the 4x12 walloped me, and I was flat on my butt going, okay, I guess I need to pay attention to this because I don't know if I can get up right now. And I remember the first time, I think I maybe gone through it twice in my life. And the first time was the worst. And the second time I tested this, I think I tested it to see if it was really real when I choose to ignore something, and discovered that I'm not ever doing that again, because it was easier to look at it at the moment than ignore it, because sometimes, and when we do ignore it, there's a reason why we're choosing to ignore it. Part of it is that we don't want to listen, and we think maybe it'll go away, because sometimes we don't want to face those things. But it's inevitable. We have to face those things. And if you don't, then, you could die and take it, and you're going to live another life having to do it all over again. And I chose to get as much information and release as much as I possibly could in this lifetime, so I didn't have to relive this again. I didn't want to have another life like this. But those 2x4s and really listening, when I get it now, it's like, okay. And I'll sit down, and this is what I do. I'll just sit down, I'll go back, and I'll sit there and put the stage in front of me, and I'm watching. Okay, what do you want me to see? And I'm watching the stage, because that's the only way I can see, because they're trying to get my attention, but I'm not knowing what I'm getting my attention on. So that means I have to get off the stage, so to speak, and watch what's happening in my life, so I can move to wherever I need to go, or take care of what I needed to take care of. And, I think this is so fascinating when I get off the stage, because a friend of mine told me this when I was in Chicago. Get off the stage, Kath. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And it's like, you're in the drama of your life. Well, we're supposed to be, and there's this and it. And I argued, only to realize he was right. Mm-hmm. It's okay to be in the drama of your life, but there are times when you actually have to get off and see what's going on, because there's a course correction coming, and you may not see it, but spirit sees it, because they're like, 50 miles ahead of you? So they're trying to get you adjusted. Mm. And that's how I like to look at it. So that's why I'll sit there. It's almost like the Star Trek, put the thing up and look at, all the different things and move it. That's kind of like how I feel like I'm doing it, but I'm not maneuvering anything. I'm just looking at all the components that, what caused it to trigger? Where did it come from? If it went here, then it's this. And then, that brought this. And you kind of do a reflection of whatever it is to get that course corrected. And I find when I do those course corrections, my speed of acceleration and the energy and the awareness of myself intensifies 100-fold, where I trust myself more, because I'm listening more. And when I'm listening more, I'm trusting more, and I don't listen to all the stuff on the outside. I don't believe what our government says. Yes, it looks like crap, but is it really crap? No, it's an illusion. There are times when I think that this world is the dream state, and we go home and we're really living. We're just having bad dreams here, or good dreams, because the reality is we don't know what reality is.
Right. It's the Matrix. It's all the Matrix, which episode are we on? And, it's, you brought up something for me that I think is crucial to change and to moving forward. For me, I call it faith. And I was raised as a, Protestant kid, raised Lutheran, and now I'm recovering from being Lutheran. And I think I'm mostly recovered from being Lutheran, but knowing that there's a power greater than ourselves. That's how I look at it. And it's just something that the longer I go, the less I try to even consider defining. It's just there. But I when I was going from Lutheran to recovering Lutheran, I had to think about, like, okay, because I threw away God for a bit. I was like, you know what, I'm good. I'm all set there. But when I started to pull my life apart and look at the stage, I like how you term that, but I had to say, okay, I'm not the one that makes my eyes see. I'm not the one who makes the grass grow. I'm not the one who makes the planets move. Obviously, there's something bigger than me out there. And the other thing that recently came into my being was, how does it work where, we get hit by the 2x4, and then it's the 4x4, and then it's the 8x8, and then it's the 12x12 until we're on our butts. But once we decide to do things differently, we don't get the same lessons anymore. How does it work like that? Who's in charge of that? Right. And so it bolsters my faith over time, just knowing that I don't have to be in charge. Thank God. I just have to be in charge of what I do, but I don't have to be in charge of the rest of it, which is a wonderful thing, because I'd screwed up.
I had a guest on my show, and he did a lot of work with the brain. And he said, you're going to get to where you're going. Your brain already knows where it's going. All you have to do is get out of your way. Just sit back and relax. And I looked at what he said and I thought, he's absolutely right. Because I remember reading years ago and having this personal experience, because everything I read back in the day, I went out and I validated, because where the planet is today was not where it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. It just wasn't. There was so much density and darkness and very 3D and no spirituality other than religion. And that was pretty much what it was. And as the light was coming onto the planet, and I remember reading something where somebody was off track, so to speak, of what their mission was, why they were here. And they were very connected to their spirit guide. And what was interesting in the book that I read is that she ended up going back, or he, whoever it was, ended up getting back on track. They just took a little detour, but they still got back on track. So the question was that detour meant to happen, or wasn't it? According to what he said in the book, it wasn't meant to happen, but it still happened, because the point is that we have a free will and free choice here. We get to still make those decisions for ourselves if we want to go down a rabbit hole, or if we want to go into the accelerated place and be, whatever it is. Because when I think about people like Elon Musk and you go, wow, you can't even fathom that kind of wealth. You can't fathom what the responsibility is, that man. But he also doesn't think anybody really wants to have his life, because they see money. They don't see what he's going through, because no matter if you have money or not, and this is the biggest thing I learned on being from my guests, is it doesn't matter where you're coming from. It doesn't matter what your wealth is. We all have our own problems, and we all have to do it. So I've had people that have had lots of money, but they're lonely, and there's a sadness about them because they're lonely. Because money doesn't make you happy, but that's what they're driven to do. So when do you make that change? It's like what you said. It comes back to when I'm tired of being sick and tired. It's when I'm tired of being alone. It's when I'm willing to face whatever that original thought was that's preventing me from having the life that I see up here, but I'm not living it, or I'm not expressing it, or I'm not moving towards it. And I think that was, again, that's an alignment process. And when we get aligned with ourselves, we're getting in line with God, and the universe, and we're becoming an integral part, like we're a cog on the wheel, that there's a reason why we're here, and everybody who comes into our life. And I started really paying attention to the people coming into my life and the messages that they delivered. So it didn't matter if they were here for a minute, what is this, like a minute, a season, or a lifetime kind of thing. It didn't matter, because it's all about the messaging. And it's about receiving those messages and blessing them on their way, because I've had so many, as I call them, angels come into my life for various lengths of time. And when they left, it was okay that they left, because I was a far better person because I let them in my life. When I could have said, I don't want you here, leave me alone, I'm going to be a loner, nobody likes me, nobody loves me. And I could have stayed in that drudgery. And I just said, no, there's something better out there. And I've got to find out who I am and how do I fit in this. And then realizing that God doesn't make junk, that I am a piece of God, as we all are. And that's where those were the things in my journey I started waking up to more and more.
Yeah, that's, it brought up a question for me, because I've had a few, and we look at all the experiences we've had and all the people that have come in and out of our lives, hundreds, if not thousands, right? In terms of people, and, tens of thousands or millions of experiences. And it's just amazing how, for my life and many that I've known who are on an intentional path, is maybe there's 10 enlightening moments, out of all that stuff and all those people and all that advice that I've been given and this and that. There's just a few, and 10 seems like a stretch. I'd say 5 that really whack me in the head. Would you mind sharing one of those sort of enlightening moments in your life that just sort of, was like, wow, that really changed the way I look at this whole party?
I have more, but I think the biggest one, because this is the one that I'm still working more through and understanding the thread of our lives, because there is a thread that runs through our life that I've just recently seen in a way that I've never seen. And I would say it would be when I was in Chicago and I was having this tsunami of emotion where I was just like hysterically crying, like I couldn't turn it off if I wanted to. And I don't know what caused it to start. And I remember reaching out to a friend of mine, and I'm just bawling my eyes out. And she helped me work through it. And it was all about when my father beat me as a child. I was 11 years old at the time. And I mean, I had welts from my shoulders to my knees, and I'll go a little further in a minute on it. And I just remember that's where my rage came from, and the pain of, how could a man do this to his daughter? That was the first thing. But what was under the emotion was my mother was in the other room and did nothing. That's what the tears were about, is that who are these people? This is why I became suicidal. This is why I wanted to die. This is why I didn't want to live. This is why I didn't want to be like my parents, because they were monsters at that moment. But the second wave, then there was another wave, and the second wave was that my mother did nothing about it. So going back and reliving this, because I'm being asked to write a chapter in a book, and it's about alignment. And so this came up, and I got to see even more about this. Because when I asked my mom that summer, when I went back to Colorado for a week, I asked her, I said, why did you do nothing? And it was just, well, there was just so much. And it was that kind of thing. And I knew at that moment that if she had an answer, she wouldn't give it to me. So I just said, well, I know you did the best you could. And I did my best to forgive her at that moment, because if he was as crazy as he was, and she felt that she was battered, and I don't know for sure, but if she felt battered, it would make sense. But it was also during a period of time when my grandmother died and my mother was like gone. on top of it. Like she had checked out. So there was abandonment issues. There were so many things that popped up in my mind. And so what I realized from that moment, this is the thread that started building that I saw within the last couple of weeks, is the rage that I came from, that the trajectory of my life changed, not for the better. It went down the tubes. That was a very life-changing experience, because I had an uncle say, everybody loved you. You were the light of everybody's life. You came in, you gave us great big hugs. You were always so happy to see us. I'm like, what? Who are you talking about? Because I don't remember that little girl. Mm-hmm. But that's the little girl I wanted to come back. And I had to move through all of that anger and all of that rage and all of everything. And as I learned to forgive my father, the Archangel Ariel was the first one to show me, to help me with that, because you can't forgive without help from a higher source, because you don't know. And then the second time, it was about 2 or 3 years ago, I was talking to my sister, and Spirit dropped a bomb. And I said, oh my God, my father was molested by my grandmother. Mm. And that explained everything. I mean, how do you not forgive at that moment? Because the Archangel Ariel had told me, you don't know the whole story. You can't make decisions when you don't know the whole story. So you learn to trust. Because that was what she said to me about Sal. I was going to walk away from him, but you don't know the story. So she said, you can do what you want, but you don't know the story. So I changed at that moment. That was another pivotal moment in this timeline that I changed, because I always walked away from people. Like, you did me wrong, you're done. And I severed them straight off the neck, cut off their head, and they were gone. And so that was the first time I made a pivot. And then because of that, I think that's why the Archangel Ariel let me know about my father and what happened to him. Because it didn't make sense to me. We all saw it, but I didn't know. And I finally, when they said he was molested, because he's an admitted pedophile. He's admitted. He's never been convicted, but he's admitted. He's still, it's disgusting. What do you say? What do you do? But I had to learn to forgive him, because I wasn't going to let him control my life anymore.
That's really powerful. And thank you for sharing that, Kathleen. It takes a lot of courage to share those kinds of stories. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I'm a firm believer in, and the reason I do this podcast is because I believe, our stories can help in other people's healing, and to hear those things and maybe provide something that they can relate to, or perhaps some direction, or something that changes trajectory to whatever degree. And it can be a small degree, it can be a large degree, but we're not in charge of how it changes someone else, but we are, I believe, responsible to tell our stories so that other people can be helped. So I want to talk a little bit about your books. I know we're coming close to the end here, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little about your books and anything you'd like to let us know so that people can jump in and get them, that would be great.
Well, this was when I was told I was going to write these books, I didn't know what it was going to be about. During the whole process, it was so many different things. Excuse me. And what came out of it was the journey of an awakening spirit. It's Dancing Souls, and the books are The Call, The Dark Night of the Soul, and Awakened. Excuse me. And this is my journey. And a lot of times when we start waking up to spirit, we go into the honeymoon phase, so to speak, where spirit's coming and life is good and all this magic is happening. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't know life could be so good. Well, when that happens, then there's another part that comes along, and that's the dark night of the soul. And that's because there's so much now more light coming into you that is now bringing light to those dark recesses of your mind. And you have to see that. You have to look at what changed your trajectory. You have to look at what happened in your thinking and what happened in your life, that you made the decision, nobody else. You made all those decisions of how you were going to live from there. and all the oppositions. And in the books, Destiny is on a quest from the creator, and only 4 of us knew about it. And even though I was in the books, Destiny was completely erased, and the first part of the book was completely downloaded by Spirit when it was coming in, as far as what the secret mission was. And Destiny is going through it. There's intrigue in there where somebody was supposed to be her friend ended up turning to the dark side and trying to get her, and Destiny's struggling. I mean, this is what goes on in your head when you're struggling, like what you're thinking, what you're feeling, learning to find your voice, learning to set boundaries, even though everybody's finding and pushing against you, and you're just having to find. And all I did was go deeper and deeper and deeper inside. My mother died during that period of time, so there was, this immense grief that came from that as well. And in the end of the book, it's like, does Destiny save the earth? And you actually will see a light bulb come on. So it really is about what it's like to go through a dark night and how to come back. And it is a manual, and that's what they said it would be. And I'm writing a few more books that I'm bringing new knowledge in this new book that I'm going to be writing. But you can get them on Amazon.com, and you can also get them at KathleenMFlanagan.com. And if you bought the trilogy, then it's a 15% savings. And I will personally autograph them for you.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, that's great. I'll put all that in the show notes so people know where to get the books and learn more about you, Kathleen. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed our conversation, both of our conversations, and I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. It's what we have to share, and I really appreciate that. So thank you.
You're welcome. I appreciate that. And I'm going to give a gift to your audience. Is I have a 3-minute de-stress balancing meditation. It's sound therapy, and it'll bring them back into balance to where they feel like the weight of the world gets off, because sound is really good for removing stuff that we carry in our bodies. And it's a free gift that I want to give to your audience so they can have the experience and maybe start on the journey of just feeling a little bit better, because it will make you feel better. So I do thank you for allowing me to be on your show. It's, again, so much fun talking to you, Daryl. I just love talking with you.
Thank you. As do I. And thank you so much on behalf of my audience. I really appreciate that free gift, and we'll include information about that in the show notes. So thank you, Kathleen, again. And I'm sure we'll be staying in touch and talking soon. If you've enjoyed When I Stop Fighting the podcast, please check out my books and my journals on my website, DarylDittmer.com. Enjoy a 15% discount by using the code PODCAST, DARYLDITTM.